Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
It always amazes me how grief brings out the best in some people and the absolute worst in others. The kind of worst that wears high heels and designer sunglasses, dabs at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, and acts like losing a grandmother is a networking opportunity. That was Marissa. Always dressed for a photo op, even at a funeral. She floated into the church like she was walking a damn runway, black Chanel dress, pearls that definitely weren't hers, and that smug little tilt of the chin like she'd just won something no one else had been smart enough to enter for. Grandma Rose had been dead 3 days. 3 days since the hospital called me, not her, because despite what the rest of the family might have thought, it was me Grandma trusted when the real shit hit the fan. 3 days since I stood next to her bed, held her hand, and listened to her last breath rattle out like the final note of a song no one wanted to end. But Marissa? She arrived late to the hospital, holding an iced coffee and talking on Bluetooth like she was ordering a damn salad. "How is she?" she asked, like the woman dying in the bed wasn't even her blood. Now here we were, 2 rows apart in a pew that smelled like dust, old wood, and rosewater, the same kind Grandma used to splash behind her ears every morning, right after reading her Bible and before she watered her orchids. The priest mumbled something about eternal rest and peace, but I wasn't listening. I was too busy watching Marissa, who was watching the casket like it owed her money. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. I caught her eye once. She smiled. That same snake smile she gave me at 13 when she accidentally told Grandma I'd snuck out to meet a boy behind the bowling alley. She always found a way to twist the knife. When we were kids, Grandma took care of both of us in the summers while our parents were working. We shared bunk beds, chores, and Sunday school, but that was about it. Marissa was all bows and ballet shoes, apple polishing her way into Grandma's heart with every choreographed curtsy. I was the tomboy with scraped knees who always seemed to forget her pleases and thank yous. But here's the thing nobody remembers. Grandma didn't need a show. She just liked being seen. And I saw her. I saw the quiet way she got up before dawn to cook bacon and biscuits from scratch, the tired sag of her shoulders when Uncle Rick dropped by asking for just a little help with rent this month, the way her hands trembled slightly when she folded the church bulletin like she was hiding something between the creases. Marissa didn't see those things. She was too busy performing. After the service, people milled around outside the church like they didn't know what to do with their hands. Some smoked. Some hugged. Some just stood around trying to remember what kind of casserole to bring for a grieving family. I leaned against the brick wall, letting the spring sun warm my back when I heard her voice, sharp, sugary, and impossible to ignore. "You look tired," she said, slipping off her sunglasses and pretending to squint. "Rough couple of days?" I didn't answer. I knew better. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Well, at least now everything's settled. I mean, we all knew I'd be the one to take care of her in the end. All those years. It's only right." I turned toward her then, just enough to meet her eyes. She smiled wider. "I earned it, you know. I was there. I showed up. Not everyone can say that. There it was, the dagger." I nodded, slow. "You showed up." "Sure. You showed up for photo ops. For brunches. For that cruise you planned last year and charged to her card." Her smile twitched, just slightly. She wanted me to use it. Yeah, I said, she wanted a lot of things. Before she could reply, the lawyer, Mr. Feldman, walked out of the church's side entrance. He looked like he hadn't aged a day since the Clinton administration, stooped posture, cheap suit, briefcase clutched like it carried state secrets. He gave me a short nod, then looked past me to where the rest of the family stood, chatting near the flower arrangements. "We'll begin the reading in 15 minutes, he said, voice dry as the desert. Marissa brushed invisible lint off her shoulder. "I'm sure it won't take long," she said. Grandma always kept things simple. I watched her walk away, heels clacking like punctuation marks. She didn't know. Not yet. But something had shifted in the final days before Grandma passed. Something she hadn't been around long enough to notice. See, 3 weeks before the end, Grandma called me. She didn't say much. Just that she needed me to come over. When I did, she handed me a manila envelope and said, "Keep this safe. Don't open it." Not yet. I tucked it in my glove compartment and tried to forget about it. But as I watched Marissa disappear through the glass doors of the church, I knew damn well that envelope was about to change everything. When Marissa leaned in at the wall reading and whispered, "Hope you like cookbooks," I smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I already knew something she didn't. People always say the dead can't speak for themselves, but I swear if you'd listened close enough to Grandma's voice in those last few years, you'd have heard the quiet sound of a woman planning something far more calculated than any of us expected. After the funeral, once the flowers started wilting and the neighbors stopped dropping off pies and chicken casseroles, I started piecing together all the little things I'd ignored for far too long. But the truth is, Grandma started pulling her strings 3 years ago, or maybe it was 4, come to think of it. She'd rewritten the will in 2019. Or maybe it was 2021. Wait, no, it had to be 2018. Yeah, that makes sense. That was the year her hands started shaking more, and she stopped going to the senior center on Wednesdays. Marissa, of course, had already sniffed out opportunity like a bloodhound. The second Grandma's hip gave out and the doctor prescribed a walker, Marissa started showing up with this big fake grin and a camera-ready hug. She took Grandma to brunch, to the salon, to the pharmacy, and she made sure everyone on Facebook and Instagram knew about it. One post said, 3 generations of strong women, 1 bottle of hairspray, and showed Grandma getting her roots dyed, while Marissa pouted in the background like a pin-up nurse. She called herself Grandma's Angel in hashtags. People fawned over her. "You're such a blessing," they commented. "Your grandma is lucky to have you." But they didn't see what happened after the filters and captions were applied. They didn't see Grandma sitting silently while Marissa scrolled her phone during dinner. They didn't hear the way she sighed after Marissa left, like she was both grateful for the company and exhausted by it. They didn't know what I knew, which is that Grandma never liked being fussed over. She liked peace and tea and crossword puzzles and pen. She never wore makeup unless she was going to church, and even then, only a swipe of lipstick she kept in a chipped Avon compact from 1982. Marissa didn't care about any of that. She wanted to play the role of the devoted granddaughter because she thought it earned her points that would eventually add up to diamonds and gold, maybe even the house if she played it right. And to be fair, for a while it worked. My parents started calling her the reliable one. Uncle Rick said she had the heart for caregiving. And me? I kept my mouth shut. I lived 2 towns over and came when I could, usually on quiet Sundays when Marissa was out wine tasting with her real estate girlfriends or doing a mental health retreat somewhere with cell reception and overpriced avocado toast. Those were the visits that mattered, though. Because during those quiet hours, just me, Grandma, and the squeak of her old ceiling fan, she told me things. Little things at first. Like how she hated the moisturizer Marissa bought her because it smelled like soap and felt greasy. Or how she'd noticed some checks had gone missing. Then bigger things. Like how she tried to ask Marissa for help calling the bank but got brushed off. How her jewelry was disappearing 1 piece at a time. How she was starting to feel like she was being handled, not helped. She didn't say it directly, not at first, but I could tell something in her had changed. The woman who used to laugh off nonsense and preach forgiveness started writing things down, locking drawers and hiding envelopes in places like the freezer or under couch cushions. One time, I found a sticky note in the sugar bowl that said, "Ask for copy before signing." That was when I realized she was scared. Not just of getting old, but of being outsmarted in her final stretch by the very people who were supposed to love her most. The big shift came on a Tuesday. She called me while I was driving home from work and said, "I need you to come over." Alone. I didn't ask questions. When I got there, she had the envelope already sealed. No return address, no label. Just my name scrawled in her shaky cursive. She didn't tell me what was inside. She just said, "If anything ever feels wrong, this will help you make it right." I kept that envelope untouched for 3 weeks. Stashed it in my glove compartment under an expired insurance card and an emergency granola bar. Part of me didn't want to open it. Another part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime watching Marissa slither through family dinners with that fake smile and sideways glances, wanted to burn it just to spite her. But I didn't. I waited. I watched. And sure enough, Marissa kept doing her thing. She redecorated Grandma's guest room without asking. She posted a video of Grandma opening a birthday present that was clearly regifted. She even once told me, dead serious, that she was practically power of attorney now. Grandma never confronted her directly. That wasn't her style. She believed in consequences delivered slowly, like ice melting on a stovetop. And that was her way of letting the burner do its work. So when the day of the reading finally came, and I saw Marissa stroll in wearing the exact same necklace I'd last seen in Grandma's top drawer, I realized it wasn't just entitlement anymore. It was theft, plain and simple. She had taken what she wanted before the body was even cold. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what Grandma had expected. When the lawyer walked in with that thick white envelope, I knew we were about to witness fireworks. The conference room in Feldman and Wallace Legal smelled like mildew, old paper, and something faintly metallic, maybe the scent of rusted justice, or just cheap filing cabinets slowly dying in the corner. The air conditioner hummed like a tired truck, and the ceiling fan made that slow, lazy circle overhead, barely stirring the staleness of the room. The chairs were those stiff leather ones, the kind that crackle when you shift in them, and the blinds were half-closed, slicing the sun into neat little prison bars across the carpet. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a lineup before sentencing. Marissa sat across from me, one leg crossed so high over the other it looked like she was trying to wring her ankle dry. Her nails were freshly done, sharp, red, and gleaming like murder weapons, and she kept tapping them on the arm of the chair in a rhythm I wanted to punch into a wall. She dressed like she was expecting to collect a crown, not a condolence. A crisp white blouse, pearl earrings, some expensive perfume that floated into the room before she did. She smiled at everyone who walked in like she already owned them. Uncle Rick looked half bored, half hungover, leaning back like he'd rather be golfing, and Aunt Dana had brought a folder of church flyers she kept fiddling with like they might explode if she let go. There were a few cousins, scattered and quiet, here more out of obligation than anything else. But me? I sat there with that manila envelope still in my bag, my stomach twisting like it had barbed wire in it. Mr. Feldman cleared his throat with a raspy grunt that immediately hushed the room. He didn't bother with introductions or small talk. He opened the thick folder in front of him, adjusted his reading glasses, and began reading in that dry, unbothered tone lawyers must be trained to use at funerals and divorces. "To my beloved family," he started, and Marissa actually nodded like she was at a wedding toast. "I leave the following, in accordance with my wishes as last amended on August 5th, 2022. I saw Marissa twitch. That wasn't the date she thought it was. I saw it flicker across her face, just for a second, but it was there. The first few items were the warm-up act. Donations to the local library and the Methodist church where Grandma had spent 40 years singing off-key in the choir. A small scholarship fund set up in her late husband's name. A hand-stitched quilt to Aunt Dana, which brought a quiet, dignified tear to her eye. Uncle Rick got her fishing poles and a photo album. There were a few small bequests, a silver tea set, an antique Bible, some books and records. Then Feldman paused. He took a sip of water and looked at the room like a man who knew exactly where the landmines were buried. The remainder of personal effects, including the contents of the safe deposit box held at Midfirst Bank and the entirety of the jewelry collection stored therein, shall be transferred to, he glanced up, my granddaughter and most trusted confidant, Harper. The silence hit like a brick through stained glass. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I barely breathed. I heard someone suck in air, loud and sharp, and realized it was Marissa. Her face went from smug to stunned in a heartbeat, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like someone had just slapped her with a wet rag in front of a camera crew. No, she said quietly, then louder, that can't be right. Mr. Feldman raised an eyebrow, but he didn't stop. He continued reading as if she hadn't spoken. This includes all rings, necklaces, heirloom pieces, and any enclosed documents or assets stored in the safe deposit box. It is my wish that Harper handle these items with the care and discretion I have come to expect from her in our private conversations. Marissa looked around the room like someone waiting for backup that wasn't coming. Are you serious? She hasn't even been around. I was the one taking care of her. I was the one. Mr. Feldman held up a hand, calm as ever. Miss Holloway, you'll have an opportunity to contest the will in court, should you choose. But this is the official, notarized document as filed. I was her favorite. Marissa hissed, turning toward me with a look that could slice granite. She told me, she promised me, I was supposed to get the collection. She said I'd earned it. I finally looked at her, and I smiled. Not smug, not victorious. Just, still. She changed her mind, I said quietly. Maybe because she finally saw you for who you are. The lawyer cleared his throat again and pulled out a smaller envelope, sealed and yellowed slightly with age. She left this, he said, sliding it across the table to me. She said it was only for your hands. I took it without a word. The paper felt heavy, almost warm, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than any of us knew. Inside the envelope was a single handwritten letter on Grandma's stationery, the kind with the little rose watermark in the corner. Her handwriting had gotten shaky over the years, but this was still unmistakably hers, loopy, deliberate, and firm. It wasn't long, just a paragraph. No dramatics, no explanation. If you're reading this, then you already know more than they ever will. I trusted you because you never asked for anything, and that's why I left you everything. The jewelry, the key, and what's inside the box, use them wisely. You'll know what to do with it. I trust you. Unlike the others. The inside of that safe deposit box didn't feel like treasure. It felt like something older, heavier, and far more dangerous than glittering heirlooms tucked into velvet pouches. When I opened the box at Midfirst Bank 2 days after the will reading, I half expected to find nothing more than a couple of brooches, maybe a few tarnished bracelets, and the diamond necklace Grandma always wore on Easter Sundays, the one Marissa used to call her retirement plan. But what I found instead felt like Grandma had left me a briefcase full of matches, gasoline, and a note that said, "Use when necessary." The necklace was there, sure enough, coiled like a snake on a small square of blue satin. But beneath it lay something wrapped in wax paper, and beneath that, a thick manila folder that immediately looked like trouble. My stomach turned before I even touched it. It was heavier than it looked and bound together with a red ribbon, the kind you'd see on old-timey legal scrolls or in black and white movies, just before someone's life went up in flames. Inside the folder were copies of signed documents, notarized pages, and what looked like bank statements from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. Grandma Rose had lived modestly her entire life, paid cash for everything, and thought people with credit cards were either foolish or doomed. She didn't vacation. She never left Oklahoma except once for a wedding in Arizona and came back complaining about the heat and the price of lemonade. And yet here, in this folder, was a full paper trail of something that didn't make sense, unless you knew where to look. It started with a contract. 3 pages, all typed, all official, dated back to 2014, between a shell company called Western Marigold Holdings and a local development firm with a name I recognized from one of those suburban strip mall projects that had gone belly up. I remembered because Marissa had bragged about investing in commercial real estate at the time. She said she'd put everything she had into the deal, and when it fell apart, she quietly told everyone it wasn't her fault. Shady partners, she'd said. I was just the angel investor. But here it was, plain as day, her signature, right next to the clause that put Grandma Rose's name down as a co-signer. I don't know how Marissa convinced her to sign it. Maybe it was the way she poured tea and fluffed pillows and acted like she gave a damn. Maybe she forged the signature entirely. Either way, it didn't stick because a second document, dated 3 months later, was a notarized revocation, complete with Grandma's full legal defense and a personal statement written in her own shaky script. It read, I, Rose M. Holloway, rescind all association with Western Marigold Holdings and assert that I was misled by my granddaughter, Marissa Holloway, under false pretenses of legitimacy and familial trust. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. Not just that Marissa had tried to entangle Grandma in some shady real estate fraud, but that Grandma had spent the last few years cleaning up the mess quietly without ever saying a word to the family. She hadn't just been storing old jewelry in that box, she'd been building a fireproof vault of insurance, piece by piece, in case Marissa ever tried to come back for more. And she would have. I had no doubt. Tucked inside the file was a USB drive and a handwritten note, brief and direct. If Marissa tries anything, show her this. Otherwise, let her rot in her own choices. It took me 3 days to go through everything. I scanned the files, double-checked the bank records, and started putting the puzzle together. Grandma had shifted a quiet sum, about $60,000, into an account under my name, with instructions to keep it out of reach of any known debt collectors or family members associated with Marigold or its subsidiaries. I didn't even know what the hell a subsidiary was until I had to Google it that night. It was leverage, pure and simple. The kind that burns clean and leaves no smoke. Marissa called me 6 days after the reading, pretending to be casual. She asked if I'd seen the necklace yet, said something about how Grandma probably meant to split things more evenly and that maybe we should talk. I said nothing useful. I just listened. She talked a lot about sentiment, family, how we shouldn't let this tear us apart. On day 7, I mailed her a copy of the contract. No note. Just the paper, folded once, in a plain envelope. I knew she'd recognize it. She didn't call for another week. When she finally did, her voice was so small I almost didn't believe it was her. No smugness. No sass. Just that soft, cracked kind of tone people use when the sky starts falling and they know exactly whose fault it is. I didn't think she kept it, she said. I didn't think she'd. I mean, it was years ago. She said she forgave me. She probably did, I said. But she didn't forget. There was a long pause, just her breathing and the hum of the line. I could lose everything, she whispered. You already did, I told her. You just didn't know it yet. She cried after that. Not loud, messy sobs, but the quiet kind, the kind you choke on because pride won't let you bawl. I let her cry. I didn't say another word. Marissa called me crying 2 weeks later. Not because I ruined her life, but because she realized she'd never get the chance to ruin mine. At the very bottom of the safe deposit box, underneath the documents, the velvet pouches, and that damn USB drive that still felt like it was glowing with something radioactive, there was a worn, faded object wrapped in a brown kitchen towel that smelled faintly of cinnamon and plastic. I didn't notice it at first, not until I'd cleared out everything else and was about to close the lid and walk away. It had been wedged under a folded piece of cardboard, tucked out of sight like it didn't belong, like it wasn't part of the grand reveal or the master plan. But the second I touched it, felt the weight of it in my hand, I knew exactly what it was. Grandma's cookbook. The same old 3-ring binder she'd been scribbling in since I was a kid. I remembered the way it always sat on the counter by the stove, half covered in flour and notes, its once white cover stained with oil spots and something reddish that probably came from a pot of chili sometime in the late 80s. She used to tell me it was just for the good ones, meaning the recipes that passed the test. Fluffy biscuits, sweet potato pie, cornbread so moist it didn't need butter, but took it anyway. She'd flip through it with a kind of sacred reverence, muttering things like "too much nutmeg last time," or "don't trust boxed broth," while she adjusted measurements that only existed in her head. So when I pulled it out from that dusty towel and saw her handwriting still alive on those yellowed pages, I expected comfort. Maybe a little closure. Maybe the kind of warmth that only comes from being handed a piece of someone you lost that still smells like them and talks like them and whispers old stories between measurements. But what I found wasn't just butter and sugar and oven temps, it was something else entirely. The first few pages were exactly what I remembered. Chicken dumplings, pound cake, sweet tea so strong it could raise the dead. But somewhere around page 30, the tone changed. The recipes started getting shorter, the handwriting tighter, more rushed. Ingredients were replaced with names. Directions were crossed out and rewritten in ink, then pencil, then ink again. One page just had a list of birthdays, most of them familiar, some not. Another page had a grocery list with every item scratched out except two, vodka and truth. By the time I reached the middle of the binder, I wasn't sure if I was still reading a cookbook or a confession. There were notes tucked between pages, on napkins and receipts and old greeting card envelopes. One was a receipt from a pawn shop I didn't recognize, dated back to 1998, with Marissa's first trade scribbled next to it. Another was a copy of an old letter written by Uncle Rick to someone named Elle, apologizing for something he'd done and begging her not to go to the police. Tucked behind a brownie recipe was a photo, black and white, grainy and torn on the edges, of Grandma with a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in barely legible ink, it said, "Not your grandfather. Not your business. But remember what men like this are capable of." That's when I started to get the full picture. This wasn't just a family legacy, it was a record. A ledger. A damn survival manual. And the scariest part? She'd left it to me. Toward the end, I found a single sheet of paper folded into quarters, so brittle I was afraid it might turn to dust in my hands. It wasn't a recipe. It was a letter, one I hadn't seen before, written in Grandma's sharpest, most deliberate handwriting. It read, "Harper, there are things in this family that have been buried for decades, and not all of them are secrets worth keeping. I didn't protect you from the truth, but I did try to give you the tools to survive it. You have the box. You have the files. You have the account. But this book? This book holds the real power. Use it however you see fit, but don't forget what I always said, people will forgive almost anything but being outsmarted. Protect what's left, even if it means being the villain." I read that line 3 times and felt something inside me sink like a rock into deep water. I didn't want to be a villain. I wanted justice. I wanted closure. I wanted to burn every lie Marissa ever told to the ground and come out clean on the other side. But the truth is, you don't always get to come out clean. Sometimes, you come out knowing things you wish you didn't. Sometimes, you come out holding a fire you can't put down, because if you do, someone else will pick it up and torch everything. The cookbook went home with me, of course. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't even put it on the shelf. I slid it into the back of a drawer in my bedroom, behind some tax folders and old photos and a box of birthday cards I haven't opened in years. Every few nights, I'd open it again and find something new. A name I didn't recognize. A date circled in red. A half-written sentence that ended in a smudge. I started keeping a notebook. Writing questions. Drawing lines. Connecting dots. Marissa didn't call again. She sent one email, short, cold, vague. Something about moving forward and respecting Grandma's wishes. I didn't respond. What would I say? That she was right all along? That I did get the cookbook? Because yeah, Marissa was right. I got the cookbook. I just don't think she knew how dangerous a little book of secrets could be.